We could do our jobs more efficiently. We could, spend more time with our families, and we could relax a little bit more. We didn't have to deal with the commute, driving, or taking the bus.
But my hope will never die.
So welcome back to another episode. Today we're talking about return to office. So 5 years ago, during the lockdowns, we all had to work from home because we couldn't be in the office. We could do our jobs more efficiently. We could, spend more time with our families, and we could relax a little bit more. We didn't have to deal with the commute, driving, or taking the bus. But then in the last, I want to say 1 to 2 years, companies have started demanding people to come back to the office. And the reason is why. The work is getting done. Employees are happier. So that's what we're going to look at today. We're going to look at these viral TikToks together and just see what we can gather from there.
In a shocking turn of events, we have data that shows that people don't like being forced back into the office full time. It turns out employees can have one of 6 reactions to this, none of which are good. So let me know in the comments where you fall. First, we have our top performers. Turns out they don't like being told how or when to do their work, so they're very likely to start looking elsewhere. Bucket 2, we have our old reliable. These people are so important in organizations, and turns out they also don't like being told to come back 5 days a week, even if they don't love remote work 5 days a week. Next, we have our double dippers. These are the people that are overemployed, so it's very likely they're already pretty reliant on 2 salaries at that point, so they're very likely to go find another remote job. Then we have another big group of people that were already pretty disengaged at work, and now that they're being mandated to come back, they feel very micromanaged, and now they're completely disengaged. Now this next group, they are not happy about returning to office, and they are gonna let you know it. And if you've seen any of my videos, you know this is the group for me. So then we have our last group of the people that actually quit. These are usually either high performers who felt really jaded in being forced to return to office, or people who are already unhappy and this was the final straw. So let me know where you guys fall, and be sure to follow along for any more remote work updates.
I just found out about a fairly large organization that's going to be requiring back to the office 4 days a week. What? In the year of our Lord 2025, 4 days a week? That is simply a good way to get people to quit. Now, I'm actually a proponent of in-office days. I do think it fosters community and creativity, and it's great for strategizing, but for overall productivity, absolutely not. At most, you need 2 days a week in office, maybe, if that. But in 2025, when we are fully set up to work remotely, 4 days a week is just egregious. I mean, maybe they need to do a RIF and it's cheaper to get people to quit than it is to lay them off. If a company is failing and they think that part of the problem is that employees are working from home, that is a leadership problem. Because there is no difference with me clicking buttons here at my desk at home and clicking buttons here at my desk in a cubicle. Except in the cubicle, I have to listen to the person next to me chewing ice all day long. If a company is not as productive as they want, it's because leadership is not holding their employees accountable, and that can be done remotely. It's just classic corporate America for leadership at the top of a big corporation like this to acknowledge that they might be the problem. They need to hold on to that power, so they blame everybody at the bottom, and they would rather uproot all of their lives, make them totally lose the flexibility that they've had, sit in rush hour traffic twice a day to go click buttons in a different building, than they would take accountability for their own actions. I would love an office to go to twice a week. I work from home. I don't have an office that I could go to, and I do miss that. But to ask people to come in 4 days a week is simply out of touch.
So if you go back far enough, Henry Ford created the 40-hour work week. Back in the day, you worked in a factory and you were expected to work 8 hours a day for 5 days. That's 40 hours, which makes sense. But if you come into an office, let's say you're an accountant or an attorney and you're pushing paper around, you're not going to be busy for 8 hours a day. And this is something that was discovered when we started working from home, because if you were working, let's say you logged in at 9 a.m., you're doing your work, spreadsheets, reading reports, whatever, By 1 p.m., 2 p.m. some days, you were done. And when you were working from home, if you're done, you can relax for the rest of the day. You just have your computer ready in case someone contacts you. But for the most part, you were done. But when you're in an office and you're done by 1 p.m. or 2 p.m., you're actually going to have to sit there until 5 just because you can't leave before 5. Those are the office rules. And that's one of the reasons why companies want you back. You see, companies, they don't just pay you a salary to do your job. That's a common misconception. Companies pay you to do your job, but also to own you for 40 hours a week. That's part of the deal. A company will never let you leave before 5 just because you finish your job. I got to tell you the story. Years ago, I was working at a company. It was 1 p.m. on a Friday during the summer. Like, it was one of those days. It was nothing to do. No emails, no nothing. So first I asked my coworkers, I said, does anyone need help with anything? There's nothing to do. It's pretty quiet. They're like, no, I have nothing to do. They were also just doing nothing. So then I go to my boss's office and I said, hey, listen, I have nothing to do. I answered all my emails. I did this. He goes, oh, did you finish this one? Did you finish this thing? I said, yeah, I finished all of it. And he goes, did you ask this person if they need help with anything? This person is working on this project. Did you ask if they need help? I'm like, yeah, I asked everybody. Everybody's just coasting, And I said, can I go home early just today? Because I'm done with everything. I knew he was going to say no. I just asked anyway. And he was like, go back to your desk and I'll find something for you to do. He comes back with some random spreadsheet, tells me to take a look at it. And, I took a look at it for a few hours. By 5 p.m., I gave it back to him and said, this is what I found. And I never saw that spreadsheet again. He just wanted to keep me in the office for 4 more hours until 5. That's the problem. That's what people don't like. Why do I have to be here if there's nothing to do? And that's the issue. That's why people loved working from home. It gave them autonomy. It gave them flexibility. It gave them control over their own time. Companies do not want you to have control over your own time. This article was talking about like people who have several jobs. If you work from home and you're busy 5 hours a day, 3 hours a day for the most part, why not get a second job? It's not allowed. I get all that. Employers don't want you to have control over your own time. That is a major part of the issue why they want you back.
So this is a real reason they don't want you working from home. So I was just in a meeting with like some really big tech people. This is like a conference style meeting, workshop. Like I am talking about, there's some really big names in this meeting. So we're talking and they do a presentation on the economy for 2025 and whatever. And like, that's what this meeting is for. And then one of the people asked this person, I won't mention the name, but they asked this person, how are you guys solving the issue of employees asking for more money and bigger raises in 2025 whenever like businesses aren't doing well? And he said, you got to get them to return to office. And I was like, not computing, right? Like I am literally like that meme. And his answer was, and I quote, because I can't make this up. Well, when people are working from home, they feel like they can exploit you more because a lot of your employees are doing side hustles, working remotely, working multiple jobs, doing all these things that they would not do when they're in your office. So they're making more money or they feel more financially safe because they have multiple sources of income or whatever it is. So when you get them to work from home, they're depending on you for their salary, so they're a lot less loud. I'm sitting here like, and everyone around me is taking notes.
As you know, I work at Amazon, so here are my honest RTO thoughts. Some of you that don't know, Amazon announced that it's going to be returning to 5 days return to office starting in 2025. Currently, right now, we've been required to go into the office 3 days a week since the beginning of 2024. Let me start by saying I am not a rule follower by any means. I'm just like every one of you, and I really cut corners and take advantage of the 3-day RTO for what it is. Some days I don't actually tap in 3 days a week, and most of the time I'm going Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. That way I can travel Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, sometimes even Monday, Tuesday. So I really do push the limits. Sometimes I go home to Ohio and I stay for an entire week and I don't tap in, and it's not a big deal. But now with the 5-day RTO, I think they're going to take it really seriously for at least the first stint of next year. My thoughts on it are this. I work on a team with a lot of adults who have kids, and a lot of adults who during COVID time moved out into the suburbs into an affordable place where they could buy a house. So I know a lot of people who did that, and now that it's returned to office, it's been such a challenge for childcare, for commute, for all these different things that could be such a hassle. Like if you have an over an hour commute, and also just family time. I have one coworker who says it's really just cutting back on her time with her son because she usually stayed home on Fridays and spent time with him, and now she has to commute an hour to the office and an hour back. For people like that, I think RTO is insane, or at least 3 days a week. I think give those people 3 days a week, and everyone, I think 3 days a week is working totally fine. So I really don't understand why the 5-day RTO, but honestly, that's what I think all big tech is going to eventually shift back to.
Here's something that doesn't get talked about a lot. A lot of managers, let's say you are the VP of a department. If you do not have any employees that you're dealing with day to day, in an office setting, are you really a VP? That's kind of the existential crisis that a lot of executives have. If you're just sitting home alone working, it doesn't matter if you're a VP. There's no one around you. It's just you. I think a lot of executives want people back just because, I want people around me. I want to feel like I'm, managing a team and all those things. The only real way to measure productivity should be the output of the work. But remember what I said earlier. They don't want you to just do your job. They also want you to work 40 hours a week. That's a major issue, that they can't control your hours when you're working from home.
Companies are dialing it back on hybrid or remote, and here's why. I'm Amanda. I've got decades of recruiting experience. I'm here to help you with all things job and career. I get a lot of questions about hybrid, on-site, remote work opportunities and people who want hybrid or remote only. The truth is that the companies are walking back on that, and many companies are making people go in 5 days a week. Forbes did a great article a few weeks ago on some really well-defined reasons as to why, and I just thought I'd share some of them with you. Number one, collaboration and team building. The truth is, exposure to company culture and real collaboration with your team members, it probably does work best on site. It just does. I've done it both ways myself, and there's nothing like being shoulder to shoulder with your team members, especially when you're just starting out, which comes to another reason, which is mentorship and just learning, knowledge exchange. You're really not going to learn how to do your job to the best of your ability unless you're learning from somebody who's already done it and can train you. And the truth is that's usually in person. And that's, at least in my experience, it seems that that's how I've seen people set up for success best, is when they're learning side by side from somebody who's done the job. Another reason is measuring input and output. There's an expression, data doesn't lie. A lot of times it's literally managers walking around and they're seeing who's being productive and who's not. So for better or worse, there is a degree that performance is based on what the managers are seeing in the office. Another reason is to cover the expense of the actual office. A lot of companies are in very long-term leases with their office space. So unless they have people filling up those offices, they're losing money. They're losing big money on office space that they rented. And that affects the bottom line. It affects people's raises, bonuses, etc. If the company is not profitable, you're not going to get your bonuses. Another reason is that the natural weeding out of the workforce or of employees. And what I mean by that is, if somebody doesn't want to come back to work in the office 5 days a week, oftentimes they'll leave. And sometimes employers will use that as a way to weed out people that are maybe on the fence with staying there to begin with. What I've read in this Forbes article mentioned or reflected that those were the most loyal employees, the ones that would come back. So I think that companies don't disagree with that, and they want to see who are the most loyal, who are going to come back 5 days a week, who really wants to be here. That's just the truth. I just thought I would lay it out in a really clear bullet points about why people are going back to the office and why companies are requiring it. I hope that was helpful. Follow along for more.
And also a lot of executives, like if you work downtown in LA or San Francisco, right, it's more expensive. Executives tend to live close to the office because they have the salary to afford it. But the regular employee is not going to be able to afford a house downtown that costs millions, an apartment downtown. They have to commute in from like an hour or two away, like in the suburbs. And that's why it's so like out of touch for executives to demand in office, because they can just walk to the office. They can just take a 5-minute walk. They can drive for 10 minutes. They're right there. They have the option of living close. Also, a lot of executives, they travel, they go to events, they visit different locations. They're not going to be in the office 8 hours a day, just like the regular employees. That's why it's very out of touch for them to demand in office when they're not even in the office like that. Also, let's be honest. If you're an executive, VP, CEO, one of those hefty titles, you're going to have a huge corner office somewhere with probably like a mini fridge in there. You can do whatever you want. You're not going to sit in a tight little cubicle sharing a space with a bunch of other people. You have a huge office that's the size of most people's apartments. So coming to the office for an executive is very different from the average worker. That's also something that's very out of touch.
So 5 years into the remote work boom, the return to office push is stronger than ever. And here is why. This is actually, I think, a good summary of the reasons that we're continuing to see this strong push into RTO. Now, most of us have seen some of the really large organizations like Amazon, Apple, Walmart, the US government pushing hard for this idea of return to office recently. And there's a number of reasons for it. And it is not something that it seems like most workers want. So in this article, it talks about while remote job opportunities are down, the competition to land one is fierce. So just 20% apparently of LinkedIn postings are remote or hybrid, but they're getting the majority, 60% of applications on the platform. Most people want to have the opportunity to work remotely or in some sort of hybrid if that is something that is suitable for their role. Now, why then are we seeing this push for return to office? We've talked about this a number of times. I've talked about it, and there are a number of different reasons. And I think this article hits on the major ones. So one is that it's to make use of the expensive corporate real estate that these organizations have. They have invested significant amounts of money into large real estate projects, and they want to use that real estate. So they need people back in to the office to justify having a massive campus or building or whatever it is. Some leaders as well think it is about productivity and profitability. So believing that since this is how work has always been done, people are more productive in the office. And so by being more productive, that can translate directly to profits. And this article talks about the fact that S&P 500 firms found that businesses were more likely to mandate RTO after their stock prices dipped, hoping that in-office time would spur productivity and spur profitability. So using this as a way to increase profitability, returns, stock price, things like that. And of course, something that we cannot overlook, we found return to office mandates are more likely in firms with male and powerful CEOs. They are used to working in an office 5 days a week, and they feel that they are losing control over their employees who are working from home. We all know it is in large part about control. We've seen this with CEOs like Jamie Dimon, CEO of JP Morgan, wanting to be able to exert that type of control over employees. And it's not just him, obviously, it's lots of CEOs and companies want to have more control over their employees. And unfortunately, they can somewhat do that right now. So the way that the job market is right now means that it is much more difficult to find jobs. So it is an employer's market, whereas a few years ago, it was definitely an employee market. And we're able to find lots of roles at companies with lots of different perks, but those things have been whittled away with the way that the economy is and the way that there are so many more people looking for jobs than there have been in the past. And of course, in Amazon style, some experts say that RTO is a back channel layoff, a way to push people out who aren't going to be returning to office or can't return to the office for some reason. So a way to do layoffs without necessarily doing layoffs. So what's the result of all of this? How does it really impact business? The data are inconclusive. So are in-office workers more engaged and productive? It's hard to say. There are some studies that will say yes and others that will say no. But one thing we do know for sure, we do find significant evidence that return to office mandates hurt employee job satisfaction. So we don't know if it makes more people more productive. We do know it makes them far less satisfied in their jobs. And I think that this is an important thing to remember, that at the end of the day, there's a lot of people talking about RTO as a simple answer for fixing a lot of very complicated and complex problems within organizations. The idea that getting everybody together into the same office is a very alluring one because it can gloss over a lot of the underlying problems that an organization might have. If working together in communication are problems, the easy fix may feel like bringing people together into an office, where that may not actually improve things. It may improve things slightly, it may make things worse. It's hard to say. But unless you're actually addressing the underlying issues, whether that's culture within an organization, whether that's the ability to communicate across departments, bringing everybody into the same place is only one possible solution, and frankly, often not even the best one to some of these complex problems. But it seems like for now, we will likely continue to see more of a push for return to office and more of a shift away from remote work as long as these companies are able to find enough employees who are willing to do it. But I don't think that it's going to go away forever. More than 1 in 4 paid workdays in the US were done from home in 2024, and that's up from just 1 in 14 pre-pandemic. So we've made a shift, and it's unlikely that that will completely unwind, and especially as it becomes more of an employees market and as we see generational shifts happening within the workforce as more and more young workers are coming in and hopefully pushing out some of these older generations who look at being in the office as the end-all be-all type of solution.
So in New York, we have a lot of people who live in Connecticut, they live in Pennsylvania, they live in New Jersey, but their office is located in New York City. So how it works is that if you live in another state, it doesn't matter which one, and then you come into New York City to work, that's called convenience of the employer rule. So if I live in New Jersey, I commute every day into New York City to work, I have to pay New York state tax on my entire income. New Jersey doesn't get any of my state tax. Think about it. If every worker, at least the workers that were working remote in 2020, if those companies closed their offices and told their employees to just stay in their home state and work, New York State will lose out on 18% of their tax revenue because there are so many people who commute from other states. That's a huge burden on New York State. New York State actually has an incentive for companies to bring their employees back into the office. So if you ask me, I think that the government told companies like, listen, we got to work together, get these people back. We don't want to lose out on the tax revenue and hurt New York. I also think that a lot of governments want employees back in the office because of the economy. Think of all the lunch spots downtown, all the coffee spots downtown, the parking garages, the public transportation, the tolls, the gas stations. They're going to lose out on so much money and go bankrupt if people are not commuting in to downtown to work. If you just work from home, all these businesses that were created to support the office, the office people, they're going to go bankrupt. And governments don't want that. They don't want thousands and tens of thousands of people going bankrupt and businesses going bankrupt. They'd rather just bring you back so you can keep subsidizing these businesses. Also, a lot of companies, they have real estate as part of their strategy. So they buy a lot of real estate to increase the value of their company. I worked for a company in New York that owned a bunch of real estate in Manhattan. Imagine if you work from home and everybody starts working from home, the value of that real estate is going to drop. And when it drops, the stock price goes down. They don't want that. That's another incentive for companies. Not all companies own real estate, but a lot of the big ones do. JP Morgan owns real estate in Manhattan. Like, of course they want people back in the office. Why would they want their real estate to go down in value after they spend all this money on that real estate? They don't want you back just for collaboration. That's just like a buzzword that they use. The real reason is probably some of the reasons that we've talked about in this video. Not everybody needs to be in the office. Like accountants, we need Excel and we need internet to do our job, and a computer, obviously. We don't need to be around people and brainstorm ideas all the time. That's just not how it works. Companies like to use collaboration as like, well, everybody needs to collaborate. Accountants don't need to collaborate. If I have a question or something, I'll send you like a team or a Slack or an email. That's it. We don't need to be in a room and brainstorm ideas. That's not how it works. But a lot of companies feel like, well, if I'm going to bring the designers back or the engineers back, then it's not fair for you to work from home. I remember years ago, long before 2020, we had a snow day. I worked in retail. I was in the accounting department, and HR told us work from home if you do not feel safe coming in. And our boss told us nobody can work from home. It's not fair because the stores are going to be open. His thing was, if the store people can commute into the store to work, you can commute into the office to work as well. It's not fair for you to stay at home. And my thing is like, the store people, they have to be in the store to do their jobs. They cannot do their jobs if they are not in the store. It's a different type of job. I don't need to be in the office to do my job. Anyways, HR told us to stay at home. We stayed at home. But his mentality is like, everybody should be here. It's not fair. Dude, the store people should become accountants if they think it's unfair. That's how I look at it. Anyways, guys, that is the video that I had for you today. Hope you enjoyed it. Let's get a discussion started in the comments. Let me know what you think about remote work and return to the office. And are you still remote, or did your company force you back to the office?